Iphis, born into a humble family, had seen the noble Anaxarete, a descendant of the ancient Teucer. He was consumed by passion for her, and when he couldn't overcome his feelings, he pleaded at her doorstep. He confessed his unfortunate love to her nurse and asked her to be kind to him, hoping that she cared for her charge. He also tried to win over her many servants with compliments and pleas. He often sent messages written on flattering tablets. Sometimes he hung garlands, damp with his tears, on the doorposts and laid down on the hard threshold, criticizing the unyielding door. Anaxarete, more deaf than the sea when the constellation of the kids is setting, and harder than iron refined in Norican fire, or a rock still rooted firmly in its native place, scorned and laughed at him. In her pride, she added boastful words to her cruel actions and denied her lover even hope. Unable to bear this prolonged pain, Iphis could no longer endure his torment. Before her doors, he spoke his final words. "You have won, Anaxarete. You will no longer be bothered by me. Prepare a joyful triumph, call upon the god Paean, and crown yourself with shining laurel. You have won, and I choose to die. Rejoice, you woman of iron. At least, you will have to acknowledge something in me, and there will be one aspect in which I will please you, and you will recognize my worth. But remember that my love for you did not end before my life, and that I am about to lose both lights at the same moment. And news will not come to you as the messenger of my death. I will come myself, have no doubt, and I will appear in person, so you can satisfy your cruel eyes with my lifeless body. But if, ye gods above, you notice the fate of mortals, remember me. Beyond this, my tongue cannot pray, and make me remembered in distant times, and give those hours to fame which you have taken from my life." Thus he spoke, raising his tear-filled eyes and pale arms to the doorposts, which he had often adorned with wreaths. He fastened a noose to the door and said, "Are these the garlands that please you, cruel and heartless woman?" He put his head in the noose, but even then he was facing her, and he hung, a pitiful weight, by his strangled throat. The door, struck by the trembling motion of his feet, seemed to groan loudly, and as it flew open, it revealed the deed. The servants cried out, and after futilely trying to lift him, they carried him to his mother's house. His father was dead. She took him into her arms, embracing her son's cold body, and after uttering the words typical of grieving mothers and performing the usual actions of such mothers, she led the tearful funeral procession through the city, carrying his horrifying corpse on a bier to be burned. By chance, her house was near the road where the mournful procession was passing, and the sound of lamentation reached the ears of the hard-hearted Anaxarete, who was now pursued by a vengeful deity. However moved, she said, "Let us witness these sad rites," and she went up to an upper room with wide windows. She had barely seen Iphis laid out on the bier when her eyes became rigid, and a pallor spread over her as the warm blood left her body. As she tried to turn back, she found herself rooted to the spot, and as she tried to turn her face away, she found she couldn't. Gradually, the stone that already existed in her cruel heart took over her body. And lest you think this is a tale, Salome still preserves the statue in the form of the maiden. It also has a temple named Aphrodite, the lookout. Remembering these things, O nymph, put aside your prolonged disdain and join with one who loves you. Then may neither the cold in spring nip your fruit in the bud, nor may harsh winds knock them off in bloom. When the god, capable of taking any form, had spoken these words in vain, he returned to his youthful form and removed the guise of the old woman. He appeared to her as the sun does when it has dispersed the opposing clouds with its brilliance and shines forth, unobstructed by any cloud. He intended to use force, but there was no need for violence, and the nymph was captivated by the god's form and felt a mutual wound. Next, the soldiers of the wicked Amulius ruled over the realms of Ausonia. With the help of his grandsons, the aged Numitor regained the kingdom he had lost, and on the Festival of Pails, the city walls were founded. Tatius and the Sabine fathers waged war. Then, with the path to the citadel laid open, Tarpeia met a just end, crushed under the weight of the arms piled upon her. Upon this, those born from the town of Cures, like silent wolves, held their tongues and fell upon the bodies now overcome by sleep, and rushed to the gates, which the son of Ilia had secured with a strong bolt. But Hera, the daughter of Saturn, opened one herself, making no sound at the turning of the hinge. Aphrodite alone noticed that the bars of the gate had fallen, and she would have closed it, were it not that a deity is never allowed to undo the actions of other gods. The Naiads of Ausonia occupied a spot near the temple of Janus, a place sprinkled by a cold fountain. She implored their aid. The nymphs did not resist the goddess's fair request. They released the springs and the streams of the fountain. But the paths to the open temple of Janus were not yet closed, and the water had not blocked the way. They placed sulfur with its faint blue light beneath the abundant fountain, and they applied fire to the hollowed channels with smoking pitch. Through these and other violent means, the vapor reached the very sources of the fountain. Waters, which could recently rival the coldness of the Alps, did not yield in heat to the flames themselves. The two doorposts smoked with the flaming spray, and the gate, left open in vain for the fierce Sabines, was made impassable by this newly created fountain until the warlike soldiers had taken up their arms. After Romulus had readily led them forward, and the Roman ground was covered with Sabine bodies and its own people, and the cursed sword had mixed the blood of the son-in-law with the gore of the father-in-law, they decided that the war should end in peace. They agreed not to fight to the last extremity with weapons, and that Tatius should share in the rule. Tatius was now dead, and you, Romulus, were giving laws to both peoples. Then Mars, his helmet removed, addressed the parent of both gods and men in these words: "The time has now come, O Father, since the Roman state is established on a strong foundation and no longer depends on the guardianship of just one, for you to give me the reward you promised, and to your grandson so deserving of it, and removed from earth, to admit him to heaven. You once said to me, a council of the gods being present, for I remember it, and with a grateful mind I noted the affectionate speech, 'He shall be one, whom you shall raise to the azure heaven.' Let the tenor of your words now be fulfilled." The all-powerful god nodded in agreement, and he filled the air with thick clouds, alarming the city with thunder and lightning. Gradivus recognized this as a signal for the promised ascension. Leaning on his lance, he boldly climbed onto his steeds, burdened with the blood-stained pole of the chariot, and urged them on with the whip. Descending through the steep air, he stood on the summit of the wooded Palladium Hill and took away the son of Ilia, who at that moment was issuing royal decrees to his own Quirites. His mortal body glided through the yielding air, just as a leaden weight launched from a wide sling tends to dissolve itself in midair. A beautiful appearance followed, one more fitting for the lofty couches of heaven, and a form like that of Quirinus in his royal robe. His wife was mourning him as lost when royal Hera commanded Iris to descend to Hersilia along her arched path and convey her commands to the bereaved wife. O matron, the special glory of the Latian and Sabine races, you, a woman most worthy to have been the wife of such a great hero, and now of Quirinus, cease your weeping, and if you wish to see your husband, under my guidance go to the grove that flourishes on the hill of Quirinus, overshadowing the temple of the Roman king. Iris obeyed, and gliding down to earth along her colored bow, she delivered Hersilia the commanded words. Hersilia, with a modest expression, barely raising her eyes, replied, "O goddess, for although I cannot say who you are, it is clear that you are a goddess. Lead me on, and show me the features of my husband. If the fates allow me to see him just once, I will confess that I have seen heaven." Without any delay, she ascended the hill of Romulus with the virgin daughter of Thaumas. There, a star fell from the sky and landed on the earth. The hair of Hersilia caught fire from the blaze of this star and ascended with the star to the heavens. The founder of the Roman city welcomed her with his familiar hands. Along with her body, he changed her former name and called her Aura. This goddess is still united with Quirmus.